Hello again. One of the first laws brought in after the Nazis gained control of Germany at the beginning of 1933 was one of enormous importance to the party and something about which they had been campaigning fiercely for years. On April the 21st, vivisection was made illegal, as was the shoeing of horses, slaughtering of animals without first stunning them, and several other measures involving cruelty to animals. The thumbnail to this video shows Hermann Goering giving a Nazi salute to various animals, which were all raising their paws, hoofs and wings as though they were attending one of the Nuremberg rallies. In the background may be seen a proclamation bearing Goering's signature and headed "Vivisection Forbidden." This is all a bit weird because, of course, Goering was sentenced to death at the war crimes trials held in Nuremberg after the war. And the last thing you might associate him with is being kind to anybody or anything. This illustrates perfectly the contradiction inherent in Nazism. These days it would be a brave man who said anything at all in favour of Nazi Germany, and such a person would at once be suspected of being a fascist, racist or anti-Semite himself. This is a pity because it prevents us from exploring a very interesting aspect of history and also in the process examining the effects of anti-Semitism itself. I'm often condemned in some quarters, not so much for what I say myself here, but rather for what some of those who comment regularly on this channel will say. Because of this, it is hinted that I have Nazi sympathies and am even perhaps a neo-Nazi myself. This is what happens, I suppose, when you disapprove of censorship and let anybody say whatever he or she wishes. If only I started deleting comments and banning people, I'm sure there'd be less criticism of this channel. This is rather ironic. One thing which might be noticed is that there are some people commenting here who have, as I sometimes put it, got Jews on the brain. Inflation? It's the Jews. Immigration? It's a Jewish plot. COVID vaccines? The Jews are behind them. War in Ukraine? Jews. Everything always comes back to the Jews. The archetype of this way of thinking may of course be seen with Hitler, for whom the Jews were at the root of everything which was wrong with his country in the 1920s. During the Weimar Republic, one might say that he had a bee in his bonnet about Jews. What is curious, though, is that if you take away this mad obsession with Jews, then you will find that most of the Nazi Party's programme for revitalising the nation was quite sensible and sound. We demand an expansion on a large scale of old age welfare. Sounds good. Abolition of unearned work and labour incomes. Breaking of rent slavery. Certainly. The state is to care for the elevating national health by protecting the mother and child by outlawing child labour. Yeah, sounds good. Religious freedom? I approve of that. Abolition of vivisection and restrictions on hunting. Yeah, I can go along with that. And so it goes on with many sensible and far-reaching measures which would all tend to make Germany a great nation once more. The effects of these policies were seen in the 1930s, of course, in which Germany began to rise economically away from the stagnation of the Weimar years. And yet, mixed in with this, the programme of the Nazi Party are a lot of mad references to Jews, which was, of course, Hitler's particular obsession. If the Nazi Party had, on gaining power, limited itself simply to the main political and economic points in the programme, and quietly ditched some of the more loony aspects, then there would have been no Second World War, no Holocaust, and Germany would probably have been the leading world power today. The problem is that ridding oneself of an irrational prejudice, whether against Jews or any other group, is not always as easy as all that, because such things are really not rational opinions which have been formed as a result of observation and gathering of evidence. They rather begin fully formed and then influence the way that people view the world. Had the Nazis simply adhered to their economic programme, I don't suppose that they would be viewed with the instinctive horror which many people feel for them today. In other words, without that awful and irrational hatred of Jews, the Nazis might actually have been very good for Germany and perhaps even a force for good in the wider world.